Our next guest is often credited as being the leading international economic advisor of our time. His theories and policy recommendations helped save Bolivia. They helped save Poland. But after 20 years of international contributions, his focus has turned closer to home. It's all in his new book, The Price of Civilization, Reawakening American Virtue and Prosperity. Jeff Sachs is a professor at Columbia University and director of the Earth Institute there. He is with us for the hour. Jeff, it is very good to see you.
Thanks a lot.
Richard Fisher, the president of the Dallas Fed, just the other day said he looked at the United States and saw an economic desert. Is that what you see?
We don't have any dramatic signs of growth. We don't have any great leading sectors right now that are creating good jobs for a huge unemployed population. And we lack the skills, and we're falling farther and farther behind a lot of other countries. So we have a bit of a mess, which is what led me to write this book. It
certainly is a bit of a mess. Jeff, if we mentioned how you have offered successful policy prescriptions to countries around the globe, if you were to offer such a prescription for America right now, what would it be?
Well, the main point that I emphasize is that we don't have simply a cyclical problem. We don't have a problem that can be addressed by a short-term stimulus. We don't have a problem that can be addressed by another tax cut. We have a structural problem in this country. For 30 years, international competition has been getting tougher. We've lost a great deal of our manufacturing sector. We covered it up temporarily with the housing boom, which ended up exploding. And now we have large unemployment and a large part of the labor force without the skills and a kind of decrepit infrastructure in a lot of areas. So we need 10 years to rebuild. Now, the politicians don't want to think about that, do they? They want the stimulus now. They want the one-year job package. But you add up temporary jolts. 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, we're not getting anywhere.
Jeff, the only thing anyone seems to be able to agree on in Washington on both sides of the aisle is that perhaps, it's not even a sure thing, we could use a little tax reform. Tax reform in and of itself isn't enough to address these structural problems, is it?
What they call tax reform actually is another sop to their campaign contributors. What they mean is more tax cuts in the middle of a bleeding budget. They want to reduce the tax rates. They claim they'll offset it with something else. But the fact of the matter is we have a large budget deficit. We have companies that have very high profits, but they're parked abroad in tax havens. The international profits of America are in the Cayman Islands.
Do we need, very quickly, do we need a tax holiday? Do we need to repatriate those foreign profits, put that money to work in America?
Well, your viewers aren't going to like it, but we need to tax those companies, not a temporary moratorium or some kind of gimmick. We need to go beyond the 1.4% of national income that's being paid by our corporate sector right now and get back to a tax rate that can pay for jobs, and more than that, for education, for new infrastructure, for science and technology. We're not paying the price for civilization. That's why I called the book this, because people want it for free. They want to get their tax cuts down, but they don't want to make the hard investments to compete with China, to compete with the rest of rising Asia. And that's where the jobs are these days.
Well, Jeff, I wouldn't worry about telling the truth and disappointing people. That's what they're here, or at least that's what they're out there to hear from you.
They'll complain nonetheless.
Well, Jeff, American prosperity is an issue in focus at the moment. Think about the Wall Street protests, right? And they're not just on Wall Street. That's where they started, but we've seen them across America, in California, in Texas. I want to talk about a couple of things. Most importantly, it seems as though there's a recognition that this isn't just some crackpot protest. Larry Fink, right, the CEO of BlackRock, the world's largest money manager, said in the last 2 days, people are afraid of the future. He's sympathetic to these people. We have some structural issues we have to fix. Richard Fisher, the president of the Dallas Fed, we were talking about him earlier, also sympathetic, saying there are simply too many people out of work, an uneven distribution of income. And I want to play for you an excerpt of a conversation I had with hedge fund manager Bill Ackman the other day. Listen to this.
I'm not sure exactly what they're protesting, whether it's capitalism or Wall Street or unemployment. Look, I think that the power of the protest is not something that we should ignore. I mean, the United States is the biggest business in the world. The president is the CEO. And if that business is not successful, we can't defend ourselves, we can't feed our people, and we're going to have demonstrations, and we're going to have civil unrest, our government can be overthrown. I mean, that's really the ultimate kind of outcome. I think President Obama began his administration with, I would call it an anti-business rhetoric, and I think that cost us in terms of business confidence. And I think legislation has made business more difficult, and tax policy it certainly does not incentivize investment. And you can ignore all that stuff when the economy's good, but if things get bad, I just think we're in the current state of affairs. So I just think whoever the next president is going to have to be someone who makes the country succeed as a business. Otherwise, we're toast.
Jeff, I didn't get the sense that was hyperbole from Bill Ackman. So if a hedge fund manager is paying attention to these Wall Street protests and saying it could result in the overthrow of the government, we really need to think carefully about who we elect. I was going to say hire, but in some ways it's the same thing, right? As our next president, the country is toast. What does that say to you?
Well, I think the perception of Mr. Ackman shows also the very wide gap in what he was saying, because he said that the Obama administration came in with an anti-business view. Most of this society doesn't feel that way. Most of society says, why did the White House side with Wall Street for so long? Why did it let them keep all their big bonuses? Why did the Bush tax break at the very top get extended for another 2 years? Why has the carried interest that people like Mr. Ackman get to take their taxes
he's
at 15%?
He's okay with getting rid of the
well,
the
I don't know him personally,
sure.
but the perception in America is that the White House sided with Wall Street. Wall Street says, oh, they've been unfair, but frankly speaking, the White House has given Wall Street pretty much a free ride, I would say, despite the calamity of 2008.
So you have seen over the course of your career a whole lot of civil unrest around the world. In your opinion, how concerned do we need to be with what we see beginning to form in America?
What's happening here is happening all over the world. That's the most interesting thing. From the Arab Spring in Tunis and Cairo, it jumped to Tel Aviv, an interesting jump. They had 500,000 people out in the streets in recent weeks protesting economic inequality. Down in Chile, where I was a few weeks ago, the students are out in mass protests and have taken over schools and universities saying, we need help. We don't have the future. And so this kind of protest is actually part of a worldwide sense that we need to return to fairness, and that globalization has riled all of us, and our governments need to be attentive not only at the very top, but to what they say on Wall Street, to the 99%.
Jeff, I guarantee you that most, if not all, of the people in a legislative position in Washington are not making that connection. What you just said, you really believe that what we see here is the same thing underway in places like Tunisia, in Egypt, in Bahrain, also in China, the Jasmine Revolution. It's
those kids are saying that. They're saying that they saw what was happening. And remember, it's high-income countries, too, because it's happening in Europe. It happened in Israel. In Chile, which is a successful economy in South America, the kids are saying, look, the inequality in this country is out of control.
But could it be as destabilizing in America as it clearly was in places like Egypt?
It won't be destabilizing if it's a wake-up call. Because the problem is right now we've been on an economic path that is not working. That's the real point. And the stimulus is not working. Even the president's one-year jobs package isn't going to do anything. We need long-term investment. We need to be able to pay for it. That top 1% in our country is going to have to do more. Mr. Ackman and his colleagues are going to have to do more. And this is really what the kids are saying. And what was interesting when I was down on Wall Street looking at this protest this past Sunday, as the tourist buses came by, people were cheering in the buses at the students. They were saying, in essence, you are reflecting our frustrations, too.
It's a story of frustration around the globe, isn't it? You were drawing a fascinating and perhaps obvious, I guess, connection between what's going on here, the Wall Street protests, what's going on in the Arab world, what's going on in Chile, what's going on in China. It's a story of frustration in Europe as well. We haven't seen it bubble up into protests in the streets for some time. It occasionally happens in France, occasionally happens in Italy. But you've been complaining out loud for some time now. You've been frustrated with the pace of progress in Europe. It was almost 6 months ago you said that they keep treating the situation as a very short-term set of operations. Get through the next 3 months. Has anything changed?
No, they're still right now not knowing what to do day to day, month to month. Europe really is divided from north to south. The very far north, the Scandinavian countries and Germany, are healthy. That middle band, France, so-so. In the south, you have crisis, and especially the biggest crisis in Greece. If Europe pulls apart, which a lot of forces are making it do right now, then the euro's in trouble, and I think the world economy would pay a very big price. If Europe can get reorganized so that they can actually help to restructure Greece's debt for the long term, save the euro, then I think that there's a possibility for recovery, and boy, would that be good for Europe, but really important for the whole world.
No question. Jeff, we see riots in Greece. When is that frustration going to bubble over in places like Germany? Right? We know that the German voters are frustrated. We know that because of what some of the members of her own party say, but also the way that votes have gone. More regional votes, local votes in Germany suggest that people are beginning to grow increasingly frustrated. So when does that frustration begin to manifest itself into something more popular in Europe, and what might that mean for the potential for a solution?
Well, there could be a downward spiral in which there are more protests, the politicians get scared, they can't get together, and then the euro is going to fall apart. They actually need leadership more than anything right now, with especially Chancellor Merkel, President Sarkozy, saying we've got to give a real solution to this crisis that saves the euro, saves Greece, stops this downward spiral, stops the protests in the streets. They reached an agreement in July, but they can't implement it because taking it through 17 European parliaments, the opposition of every party, local government, local protests and so forth, is meaning that they're just not functioning right now. They have to speed up to get to a real solution.
Where does the leadership come from? Mervyn King, the governor of the Bank of England, so frustrated with the lack of progress in Europe that he was forced to extend the quantitative easing program yesterday. And it was clear in the language that the Bank of England used that there is frustration there as well. Where does the leadership come from?
In our system, the leadership has to come from the top if we're going to get a quick solution. Otherwise, we have unrest at the bottom. And when we don't have leadership at the top, when we have politicians that are only keyed to the next election and the next election a year away, then they're looking at gimmicks and short-term solutions. We need leadership that looks beyond that. The world can't be organized for the convenience of the re-election of the politicians. If it is, we're going to be stuck in a short-term spiral, and it's going to be a downward spiral.
Christine Lagarde at the IMF is trying to exercise leadership, saying that everyone needs to wake up to the uncomfortable conclusions that need to be drawn and trying to add some urgency to the conversation. It's not working. Who do you have faith in to take a leadership role and push these discussions forward to the point that something meaningful happens soon?
We need, of course, structurally, we need Chancellor Merkel coming forward and saying, we're going to save the euro. Germany's central to this. She's key. We need President Obama taking a longer view, not the short-term gimmicks. We need Chinese leadership and Indian leadership. It's hard, but it's not thousands that are needed. It's a few that could help tell the world, okay, calm down, we're not going over the edge. And if we don't have that leadership, we're going to see the kind of unrest spread. We're going to see the dissatisfaction boil over. And we really, that's in the end not going to solve any problems. But this unrest and demonstration is reflecting a real mood and a real set of concerns and a real need for structural change.
Jeff, thank you for coming and joining us.
A pleasure.
A plea for leadership from Jeff Sachs of Columbia University. Read his book, folks, The Price of Civilization, just out recently.